In all these years, my job was always involved in setting up combines, making them more efficient, checking for grain loss, and there's a lot of combines going on those large farms. And it's a rough job. It's a dirty job. It's not safe. We were looking on the ground oftentimes trying to find the kernels and just figured it wasn't accurate enough. You always just look for the thick plum kernels. You don't see the little ones, the broken ones. You're just not accurate enough. And, you grew all this crop, you grew the good crop, you used the best fertilizer, you put all the hard work in it, the best seed, the best chemical, sleepless nights about spraying. And then at harvest, you want to make sure you harvest that stuff, right? Because the whole mentality is, for us at Bushel Plus, the mentality is you can reseed the crop, you can respray, but you can only harvest once. And that can be done a good or a bad way. And then we started throwing drop pans underneath the combines, like we would run beside it with a shovel or throw a pan underneath. And then, one of my buddies fell once beside the combine. And, once you hear a story like that, and we've heard many more since when we do our combine clinics and trainings, it's a big safety aspect where those machines get bigger. And we didn't want to throw pans underneath and get driven over. We didn't want to have measurement methods that weren't working well. And so the idea came about that we were playing with prototypes of remote controls, electromagnets, and that really grew from working at Cargill, showing these prototypes to people, into farmers telling me, hey, I want one. And I was like, oh, okay, well, there's only a couple right now, but I can maybe build a few more. And they went, yeah, here, there you go, here's a check. And basically, that's how the company started. That was kind of the idea behind it. And then that grew into more people wanted some. And I can tell a bit more about this later, but I wouldn't be here without these cool farmers in the beginning that wanted one and trusted me with their checks, basically. It is technically a happy accident, really. Like I never went out and went, okay, how can I start a company and how can I make this a go? I always thought and dreamt about hopefully having my own farm someday, or rent some land, work for somebody, rent some land, or do some custom combining or something. That was my dream. So I stumbled kind of into this where I had the opportunity to have a company manufacture some of these things. And then I had the opportunity with people wanting some more. And I didn't look at it, okay, how can we make money on this and how can we make a company? I was looking at it from, I'm going to work my ass off here as an agronomist, excuse my French. I was going to work my butt off for my customers here and help them as much as I can with their combines. Because, I was there for all year round. I was there for the spraying, the seeding. And it was bugging me that when you show up at harvest and they throw 4 or 5 bushel of crop out the back. And, in canola, that's a lot of money, but also in wheat and the volunteer crops that come after. And then you would be spraying this again. You would do tillage again. You would talk about crop rotation and then weeds and all the regrowth. And, and all of a sudden we're trying to spray canola out of soybeans. And it's like, if we chuck 1 bushel canola out the back of a combine, that's 50 pounds. That's 10 times the seeding rate that we're putting down out of the combine. And 1 bushel is the goal. But in reality, we're talking, between 2 and 6 and more bushel canola loss in Western Canada. And now also in, Western Australia, we're involved in studies there with the Agricultural Association. So there is a lot of crop going out the back, and it was bugging me and still bugs me today. But that's where the passion comes from to help and makes things better for farmers. And it's not about blaming the driver or the farmer. It's about the machine can be set so or so, and we just want to help with that. Yeah, they look pretty rough. And, I can't take all the credit for all the design. I tell you that. I can take the credit for founding Bushel Plus and, growing it into a company and what it is today, and taking a prototype to have it, shape it into a design and shape it into a product that you can actually sell. The first one we were playing with, and the company was helping me with some drawings and some ideas. It looks pretty rough because when you build something for yourself, it doesn't really matter how it looks. You can build it out of whatever material, you can do the wiring the way it just works for you. But taking this to the next level of actually selling this so that it works properly, that, you think about warranty and all these things. So So the first ones are more of this trial and error and making it work. And, if a battery screws up or, if a battery goes like this, then it's not a big deal because you know how it all works and you got a second battery with you. It's not a problem. But the big work was really to build the infrastructure around it to actually produce a product, have this assembly line and build this product in a kind of a Lego IKEA style way. So yeah, and that is early on over the years. And I worked with lots of great people out of the industry, with combine specialists, and other farmers on this, where ideas came together. And it's been great. And I'm in touch with all of these guys still. And, we have great relationships and still learn from each other every day. It's a super cool community. We are close to 30 employees now in Brandon. Or headquartered in Brandon, I should say. We have a bunch of people remote working in sales territories, supporting our dealers. But it's really cool to see this, and it's interesting when you go from by yourself trying to figure these things out to a couple of people that help you, and all of a sudden there's almost 30 employees. And I always want to make a point of mentioning them because they do a lot of hard work out there. And my face is in a lot of the advertising and what's going on out there, and kind of the spokesperson for it. But, everybody in the company has just as much passion for the products and for our customers. And we want to make sure we have our values out there, our quality experiences for our customers. And we continue with innovations to bring new things to the market. As a big kudos to my team. They do a lot of work. They have a lot of things going on in the day. They're getting a lot of different things from different areas. We don't have a day anymore in the year where we don't have a combine going somewhere in the field around the world with our products on. So even if we sit in Brandon, Manitoba with minus 35 in a snowstorm, there's a combine going somewhere that's dropping a pan or putting our concaves in somewhere around the world. I just have a massive appreciation for my team and the hard work that they're doing. It's a lot of fun to work with them. And, we're trying to do something different at Bushel Plus, where we grow a culture of, lifting each other up, telling each other openly what we think, collaborate, listening to the feedback. Because I always tell them, I can't fix what I don't know. You got to tell me. And we have a very open relationship on those things. And it's cool to work with them. And I always say that at Bushel Plus, you work with Marcel, you do not work for Marcel. And it's a really fun crew. And when you see when the business started to where we are today, and how many people we support and how many families they're feeding at home and their kids, it's a very humbling feeling. And it puts the responsibility in perspective that my leadership team and I have to make this company a success and do the right thing for the customers as well as for our employees. So and kudos to our customers and the team here. Yeah, there's a specific one that kind of kickstarted it all. It was south of Brandon. I went out to a customer who had too much fusarium in their grain, and that summer, everybody just said, just turn the fan up in the combine and blow the fusarium out the back. And it's like, yeah, but how much wind? And are you sure you're not blowing the good stuff out the back? And so long story short, I went out with my prototype, checked their combines, and, they were throwing 3.5 bushel of grain out the back of the machine in the first place. And the quality wasn't well of the sample. So then we try to reduce the harvest loss. So we changed some of the settings, brought the loss down to way less than a bushel. And then we went to, okay, let's drop that pan a bunch more times, take some grain samples and play with the sieves and play with the wind and try to see if we can get the fusarium out the back, which we did. So all of a sudden they can market that crop for number 3 or number 2, but still better than not marketing at all. And we got a little bit lucky, I got to say that too, because the fusarium moved in really early that year and the kernels were very small and light, so we could blow them out. But that farm manager called me back a week later and he said, you know how much money you saved us there, Marcel? Like we're talking $65,000 to $70,000 here last week. And he goes, you should build a couple of those things. They work really well. And then I was the agronomist at Cargill. So they started buying seed from me and fertilizer. And then I came to Canada with nothing, with a bag of clothes and trying to learn English. So I didn't have money to go out and buy metal and paint for all these things. So these first customers, I'm 100%, 120% grateful and thankful for, and will be for the rest of my life, that they trusted me in the beginning, because this is how it went. As I just said, they looked at it, said, I want one. I said, okay, I'll get some done. And they said, yeah, here's a check. And they wrote me a check right there, and they basically prepaid this thing before they even saw exactly the unit that they would get. And the trust in that it just shows how great the ag community is, specifically in Western Canada, to get something like this off the ground. Also, the company that helped me in the beginning building these, they gave me a bit of a break and helped me with floating some of the metal expenses for a few days until I got the money from the farmers. And then I went to a trade show in the fall. Same thing. I had one system there. I told them, this is how it works. This is what it is. And I will have them to you before harvest. And they said, that's great. We won't be combining for a while. It's wintertime, but here's the check. And it just blew me away. And, you tell this other people in the industry or back in Europe, and they all shake their head and they go, that is amazing. Because, again, I didn't have the money to start this. And again, it was just a hobby, and it kind of grew into something. We love to talk to lots of different people, but, ideal customer is the person that, so everybody with a combine, really. It doesn't matter the field size. We just got a testimonial last week here on Twitter from a guy that farms 850 acres. And he said, when I saw the Bushel Plus, I needed to buy it because it made all the sense in the world and paid for itself right away. We have farmers in Ontario with 200 acres. They saw it at a trade show and they said, this is a no-brainer. We have farmers that have, 40,000 acres in Canada or the US, and we have larger farmers in Europe. But at the end of the day, it's about being open-minded and realizing that a machine can do more. People calibrate their air seeders and their sprayers. Why don't we calibrate our combines properly? Because we have proper tools to calibrate an air seeder with a bucket and a scale. So here's our bucket and a scale for the combine in simple terms. Farmers talk, and if something goes well, bad news travel fast, but thankfully good news travel good as well. And in this case, if a farmer saves money and they like it, thankfully they talked about it. And I actually have a perfect example. I was just at AgSmart here in Olds this week, and completely random sat down at a table, and a farmer sits beside us and says, "Oh, you're Marcel from Bushel Plus." Shakes my hand and says, "I want to thank you yet. I called you last summer and I had a question. It was a Sunday and I didn't think anybody would pick up the phone, and you picked up the phone and you actually helped me. And I needed something because I bought one of the very first Bushel Plus systems from you, very first ones. And I remember the design. It was the very first design, and he had one of those. So he bought that thing. Like when we talked the very first ones, it's like, 2017-ish. And he goes, that thing still runs and it works. And I'm so glad you helped me that Sunday, because he just needed to fiddle around with those magnets a little bit to get them going again, because he changed something to customize it. And I helped him with it. And, I shipped him another magnet to help him out, put a couple hats with it. And, that guy had the best time and was so appreciative of just shake my hand and say, thank you. And I couldn't quite believe it in the beginning, because it's like, it's a very humbling moment that a person after so many years still speaks so highly of the product that was built years ago, and now is happy about the customer service we can provide with the company. Mm-hmm. It was a really cool feeling, and I'll be forever grateful again for the company that helped me build them in the beginning, and the farmers that trusted me there. And they talk, they've talked a lot, and they talk worldwide. So it's about 33 different countries that we're exporting our products in. And that is, some of it is direct sales. Most of it is through dealers and distributors in that that goes over obviously Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Germany, Poland, Finland, Sweden, you name it there. And then we have product in South America, in Chile, in Paraguay a lot. Some cool things in Japan happening with our stuff as well. They're harvesting wheat and rice over there. Products in South Africa. There's really some interesting farming areas in South Africa as well. And it kind of, there is New Zealand, where they grow some of the highest yielding crops in the world. The guys that are in the world, in the Guinness World Record down there. One of their neighbors called us a couple of years ago and said, "Yeah, we're growing these Guinness World Records, but we need some of those SmartPan systems for this too yet to get really everything out of the crop here." So it's some really cool stories out of countries that are fun to work with, and it's very different, right? Different cultures around the world, different ag. Those are some of the countries that we work in. We will be at Agritechnica in Germany at that large trade show for the first time this fall. I walked that show when I was a little kid, been there a lot of times. And if you would have told me back in the day that my own company is going to have a booth there someday, I repeat myself here, but I would have probably not believed it. So it's pretty exciting to see this global growth and the support of people. So the Bushel Plus SmartPan system, as we call it now, is a drop pan system that is basically, so imagine you run beside the combine and throw the pan, which we don't want to do. So we basically build a system that throws the pan for you, to describe it if you've never seen it. If you go on our website and you see a silver carrier, it's kind of a square base that has two permanent magnets on the top that you can attach to the combine underneath the axle, underneath the feeder house to have it higher up away from the stubble on the header. And then inside this carrier, you have all the important stuff, the rechargeable battery, the receiver and electromagnets that are inside. And what happens is inside those permanent electromagnets are holding a drop pan inside this carrier. So the drop pan sits underneath the carrier. Carrier acts as a cover while it's underneath the combine, so no kernels can fall into this pan beforehand. Super important. Otherwise, you shouldn't check your losses if you don't have a cover on your drop pan, because you'll have kernels falling in prior and mess up your sample. So you put this on the combine in 2 seconds, no wires to run, no brackets to put on. Then you jump in the combine, you set it the way you want it. You calibrate the loss sensor as you go, and we go through this in our trainings quite intensively of how to do this with different machines. You drop the pan as you do that calibration, and then the pan will catch a physical sample from what's coming out the back of the machine. And then there is a couple different style drop pans for different stubble conditions, so it lands properly in the field. That pan can be released out of the carrier from a remote control or from your phone, because the carrier actually creates its own Wi-Fi network and talks to our Smart Drop app that we have developed. So pretty sophisticated tech by now. Also gives you a feedback function to the remote and the app if the pan actually dropped. So you're not sitting in the cab wondering if it actually went. We have an air separator, which is called a sample cleaner, that cleans the chaff and straw away from the kernels in about 40 seconds, blows all the chaff away from the kernels with wind. And you can turn the wind up or down depending on the crop. And then there is a scale that all comes as a package with an app for Android and iOS. And then that app just needs a couple parameters of what crop and what type of combine, what kind of header, the width of it. And then you can either drop your straw and chaff in the windrow and do the measurement, or do spreading the chaff and the straw as you see behind me. And there's multiple areas where we can measure on the combine. So the app really walks you through how to do this and really fine tunes that setup. And then it breaks it down to bushel per acre, dollars per acre, and a really cool number, dollars per hour grain loss. And dollars per hour is a scary number, because oftentimes we see $800 to $1,200 an hour flying out of these back of the machines, which is too high. $1,200 an hour is a lot of money. And then people realize, okay, you know what, we have a few minutes to dial in this machine. And the cool thing about this tech is you can then save combine settings inside the app and notes and pictures and the loss results that you had. So then next week or next year, when you go back into similar conditions, you have a benchmark to what you were doing, you have a benchmark to what worked well previously, and you have a starting point for that. So it's not just a pan or a tool. It's really a system to learn more about your machine. And in the first year, the feedback is that people try to change settings and reduce their losses. And the second and the third year, they realize, you know what? We know the machine better. We can now push the machine. We can drive faster. We can harvest more acres per hour, because now we have a system with our SmartPan where we can actually quantify if there is more loss when I drive faster, and I change my settings accordingly to the speed. So now people say, I can drive faster with the same amount of loss or even less loss going forward. So that's where Bushel Plus started. We since evolved into also acquiring other companies and have other products that help fix grain loss. But the SmartPan system is basically our flagship product, how it all started to quantify harvest loss. And we're exporting this now in about 33 different countries, work with all the major OEMs. They use it in their engineering departments, in their benchmarking tests, in their demonstrations, and dealers are actively selling it around the world. So it's been quite a journey. I can answer that quick. If it's not quick and easy, nobody wants to do it, right? I'm a farm kid by heart. If that combine stands for 2 minutes in the field, it feels like 3 hours for everybody involved, right? It's just painful if it's not quick and easy. So yes, it was definitely a system that was never there before, where it was attaching, dropping, cleaning, and the calculations to be done in just a few minutes. So once you're used to the system, you can do that whole setup in about 4 minutes, and you know what that machine is doing. Takes the guesswork out of it. So it really tells you what the machine is doing, and you're not guessing anymore. Keep it simple. Some definitely, they said, man, this is really cool. And, we thought about half of this stuff, because there's some were using a pan, but then they didn't have the proper calculations or nothing to clean the samples. So let's say surprise might be the wrong word. They're very appreciative of it, that a company came and did the full package and not just pieces of it. So obviously it depends a little bit on the operation, because some people are doing a lot of checking already versus some are not. But again, it's not about blaming the driver. It can also be something wrong on the machine, or something could come loose, and then that's what you figure out with the pan. So here's what we see in average, okay? The systems run you anywhere, between $3,300 and $3,600, maybe a bit more, depending how many parts and pieces you want to add to it yet. But the whole meal deal comes to your farm for like, $3,400-ish, okay? So the standard feedback is usually from people, that thing paid off here in the first few days, sometimes even in the first field. So now imagine some of the average canola loss years ago, when I did the research on it, was still around or close to 6 bushel an acre, between 4 and 6 bushel an acre. So if you figure out on your farm you're losing 5 bushel out the back, and you bring that down to 1 bushel per acre across your entire farm, of how much money that could be. So 120 acres, that thing is paid for. That's usually the average, what we see out there. And the money that you save is really year over year over year. So for example, it's not just the grain loss that saved you all of a sudden 100,000, or, there was another article yesterday where somebody said they saved hundreds of thousands of dollars across their farm because canola was worth so much money. So like the numbers are enormous. And when you put this now in perspective, where I talked about less regrowth, right? Less volunteers. So now you spray that volunteer crop next year less out of your beans, out of your other following crops. So this running the sprayer across the acre will cost you X amount per acre. The chemical will cost you X amount. The tillage, the fuel, all that kind of stuff. You know, we do combine training where we talk about fuel consumption. There's so many things that this thing pays for in the long run that it's really more an agronomy question than an equipment question anymore at some point. And then a cool example out of England, farmer bought a system from us, and his testimonial is that he finished harvest 3 days earlier, like 3 full days, because he pushed the heck out of the combine and kept checking his losses, changed the settings, finished harvest earlier, had 3 more days and 3 more nights to basically seed his field, because I seed a lot of fall crops. And it was such a wet fall that he had the crop in and his neighbors didn't. Like things like this, you can't put a price tag on it, you know. And then in Australia, there was a study out there that just in Western Australia, there's about $350 million of grain estimated to be gone for grain loss there year over year. So break that down per farm per acre. There's a lot of money to be kept yet on those farms, let's put it that way.